let's go ahead and get started. Just a quick reminder, if you, it looks like everybody's muted, which is awesome, but if for some reason you haven't, just please do that unless you're trying to speak, and then of course just chime right on in. Hope everybody's having a good week. It's actually really beautiful right now here in Louisiana, up in the Bossier Shreveport area, so we're enjoying an unusually cooler day for the middle of July. So hopefully you guys are experiencing the same thing. We've got quite a bit to get to tonight, and wanted to start first with talking about the crosswalk and what's required in answering any questions. Now, we've done this once before, so we'll just kind of run through it real quickly, but then of course if you guys have questions, jump in or stop me or whatever. Okay, so without further ado, let me share my screen. And you should be seeing, hopefully, the assignment. Let's see if I can get it to come up. Now, here's my problem is that I am in editing mode. So let me go back and turn that off. Hang on. Let me stop sharing so you guys don't have to watch me get back where we need to be. Oh, where's my little edit button? It's gone. It has gone away. Okay, while I'm doing this, what other questions or comments do you guys have?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was able to complete the crosswalk. I didn't really have any problems with that. But when I'm working on the PowerPoint and the 7 questions and answering them, on the directions you have it being a 15 to 20 slide presentation, and right now, which I'm not finished, but right now I only have about 11 or 12.
That's okay. I'm not going to, it's not a matter of, oh, you must have exactly this many. As long as you've adequately covered the content, then that's fine. I'm not going to mark you down. Okay, so let me get back to sharing again, now that I've got this open finally. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you real quickly through this. So you're going to do a total of 6 standards. Ideally 4 student academic state standards and 2 from one of these, either ISSLC, SLLA, etc. Now, a lot of people are like, well, how do I find the standards? If you simply do a Google search, so if I typed in ISSLC standards, I'm going to get a page full of them. Same thing's true for Louisiana. You can just type in Louisiana state standards and it'll be there, or Texas or Florida or California or wherever you are. So you should be able to find these. Now, I've got a couple people in class who are not educators. They work in other fields. So if you're like have professional standards maybe for your industry or something like that, you can also use those. So let's pull up, let me stop sharing again for just a second. Let's pull up some standards here so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so let me go back to share again and see if I can get this to work. Okay, let's hope my computer is going to be cooperative tonight. So I'm just going to type in Louisiana. Let's do ISSLC standards. Okay. Oh, that's weird. It didn't like what I said. Too many I's. Okay, so let's go to the ones for 2019. And I can do any one of them. So I'm just going to pick this one right here. So you'll see here are standards. Okay, these are standards for school leaders. These are standards for programs in educational leadership, etc. So I'm just going to pick one. So I'm going to start here with this one, number 1. And so that's my standard. Okay, now I'm going to switch back over to here. So the standard that I am actually using is ISLLC standard number 1. Okay, so when I'm filling out my form here, this is a national standard, and you'll see ISSLC standard 1. Okay, so that's what you put there.
Tracy, are you sharing or no? Because the
I'm
screen
sorry,
is
I
just
thought I
you.
was. Now, can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate you telling me that. Okay, so anyway, I'll go back so you can actually see it. All I did was type in ISSLC standards, and it brought me to, actually, I'll just do this for you guys. It brought me right here. And click that on, And lo and behold, there are my standards, okay? So I'm just going to pick the first one. That's going to be the one I'm going to work on. So, school administrators and educational leader, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so when I'm working on filling out my crosswalk here, it's not a state standard, so I'm going to leave that blank. It's a national standard. So I simply typed in ISSLC Standard 1. Okay, now let's go back and actually look at that standard. When you're unpacking standards, basically what you're doing is breaking it into pieces. And the reason that you do that is these standards are very, very rich with different expectations. So punctuation is one way that you can tell exactly what it is they're wanting you to teach. So if you've been around education for a while, you may have heard people talk about that our students aren't doing very well because we're not teaching maybe to the depth and complexity of a standard. So a lot of times people read these and they think it's pretty simple. It's just a, straightforward thing. But in reality, once you really break them apart or unpack them or whatever you want to call it, you will see that within a single standard, there may be a set of 3 to 5 or 6 concepts or different objectives that students should learn. So this is kind of back to the old English lesson of diagramming a sentence in a way. So I know that when I'm looking at a standard, I pay attention to the verb. I pay attention to wherever there is a comma. And I'm going to pay attention to what is the overall object of a particular standard. So in this case, you will see that what is the present tense or the verbs. So it's facilitating. And then specifically, what are the objects? Development, articulation, implementation, and stewardship. So my verb is facilitating. You don't have to put the rest in there. You could just put facilitating. What is the adjective? Well, our adjectives, sharing and supporting. What are we sharing and supporting? A vision of learning. Okay? So see how I've broken it down? So if I were to go back and look at this standard again, what it's telling me is that we need to be promoting and facilitating, okay? Those are the 2 main verbs. What are we doing? Well, if I were actually teaching this standard, I would know that I need to talk about how do you promote and facilitate development. That's one object. Articulation, implementation, and stewardship, all around the idea of a vision of learning. And it has to be shared and supported by the school community. So it's not okay, it's not enough if I'm going to meet this standard just to develop a vision of learning. That doesn't take care of everything. I have to not only develop it, I have to be able to articulate it, I have to show implementation and stewardship, and then I have to share it and support it with the community. So that covers the first part of this particular crosswalk. When you get over to the type of PLC or PLC activity, this is wide open, guys. So, you may say this is probably best handled by an administrative team. Or maybe like here at LSUS, we have an instructional curriculum committee that talks about and works on standards and where we put them in courses and things like that. So whatever type of PLC that you're going to use, just tell me what it is. So right here, I put an instructional team, and I defined it down here, who that might be. You can define it right here in here if you want to. And then what kind of work is the activity going to do, or excuse me, is the PLC going to do to actually ensure this standard is taken care of? So my instructional team is going to work on this standard, and that includes the principal, an instructional coach, the assistant principal, grade level chairs, and academic coaches. What are we going to do? We're going to start talking and thinking about the first part of this standard. We go back again right here, the development. Okay, because we've broken it apart and we know that we've got to take this in chunks or in pieces. So what is it they're going to do in their PLC to address the standard? They're going to start working on the vision and mission development. Okay, kind of makes sense? Okay, some of you are looking at me like, yeah, I got this. Some of you are looking at me like, what in the hell is she, heck is she talking about? Okay, I'm going to assume we're good, or you just don't want to speak up. So just to kind of catch everybody up, for academic state standards, yeah, just choose any four. If you want to do, you know, let's say that I think, gosh, I'm really hooked on third grade right now. It seems to be my go-to thing. So I'm going to look at third grade student standards in, I don't know, pick a state. Let's say Texas. We'll pick on our neighbor today. So you'll see right here it is. And, whoops, sorry. Here's all of the information. Here's all their standards. And let's say I really want to look at reading, or English language arts. There we go. And here it is by grade level.
It's not sharing again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I always forget to do that. Okay, now you can see. Okay, so I just did a Google search. You know, let me go back in. Sorry about that. Just did a Google search on third grade student standards in Texas. Here's what comes up. Usually going to be your first hit. I know that I'm particularly interested in language arts and reading. And third grade's obviously in elementary. So right here we've got third grade standards. So you just click on this little button and whoa, there's all the Texas standards. Now I can, if I, you know, since I'm doing 4, I could pick, sorry guys, I don't mean to make you nauseous here as I'm scrolling through, sorry. Somehow lost third grade. There it is. Okay, so don't do anything with the introduction with Texas because they seem to give us tons of information. But let's say that, gosh, I want to do 4 standards. Well, guess what? I can do 1, 2, 3, 4 right here together. Now, Texas finally wised up, and they've actually kind of broken theirs, unpacked them a little bit, but they're still really rich. Because notice a student just in this standard has to listen actively, ask relevant questions to clarify, and make pertinent comments. So it's a standard that's broken apart, and there's even more unpacking that could happen here. So my 4 state standards could be, like I said, here it is, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or I could say, you know what, I want to do 1 in reading. I want to do 1 in math. I want to do 1 in 3rd grade. I want to do 1 in 5th grade. It's really up to you. Okay? Okay. Oh, okay, as far as resources, regarding the types of PLCs and PLC activities, trying to think, if you will go to like, I think it's just do 4, let me make sure before I say that I've got the right one. Let me close that out. Before I tell you guys, I think it's his website. It might help if I put in his whole name, Rick. Do 4. Let me see what I come up with. Okay, yeah, let me share my screen again. Okay, so I just did a Google search for Rick DeFore, and here he comes up, Solution Tree. And he's got some pretty good resources on here. Most of them are free. That talks about what each one of these are. But keep in mind, there's not a prescribed, that's what I'm looking for. There's not a prescribed type of PLC. You know, one of the things that I did as a principal was, you know, we were mandated at the time to have, you know, some sort of a leadership team. It was state mandated. It was called site-based management. And the state was very specific who could be on this particular committee. But other than that, nobody said anything about, you know, required PLCs. But one of the things that I felt real strongly about when I got to the high school was that we needed to have more collaboration, we needed to have more input, we needed more feedback and all that. So I created this whole system of PLCs, and literally it just came out of my own head. There was, you know, nothing prescribed, nothing really as a guide. So we had what we called we had our site-based decision-making team, and they sort of functioned like a school board would, okay? They didn't get to make a lot of decisions, but they could have lots of input, and there were certain things that they could vote on, like the budget and stuff like that. Then I had what I called my campus instructional team, and you saw that in the example. The only thing that team ever did was related to teaching and learning. So you couldn't come in that meeting and talk about the field trip. You couldn't come in and talk about anything else. It was strictly about instruction, and we made that sacred. Well, running a big high school, you have to deal with the operations side, you know, like who's going to cover what game. And, you know, we've got 3 events on the same night in the same space. And, you know, operation stuff had to be handled. So I created another committee called the Principals Council. And they were all about organization and stuff. And some people were on the instructional team and Principals Council, some weren't. I just defined that for myself. And then we had several others. We had grade level, or excuse me, department level PLCs. We had something called the Teacher Leadership Cadre. And I'll be honest, I put all my troublemaker teachers on there who were big influencers on my campus. And I gave them all the problems. And I'm like, here, solve it. And really kind of changed the whole culture and climate of my school. But like I said, there's not, I mean, you can make up a PLC. You know, this is your chance to be creative. And you can put whoever you want on it. You know, you may say, I think this, if we're talking about 3rd grade reading, this needs to be a PLC of the 3rd grade reading teachers. Okay? So there's not a right or wrong, guys. Does that kind of help? And then in terms of what they're going to do, again, just think about kind of like what you do with lesson planning. How are you going to accomplish your goal? Okay, and it should tell you within the standard, just like I showed you with the SLC standards, that you had to develop, you had to articulate. So I could just break that down and say I'm going to develop the vision and mission, and then maybe another PLC activity might be we're going to articulate and communicate it, that kind of stuff. Okay, let's see. You can use any national standard you want, guys. I just gave you some suggestions. Okay. Oh, okay, and then Matt's asking me about the method of evaluation. Let me go back over here. Let me share again, guys. Okay, so lots and lots of examples for you. Like I said, just ignore all those. Tons and tons and tons of examples and examples and examples. And Matt, I'm not seeing what you're talking about, the method of evaluation. Are you talking about on the PowerPoint or on this?
It's one of the columns on the 2nd page. I think it's like the middle column on the 2nd page on the template.
Gotcha. Thank you. No, you don't have to do that. I just put that in there so that you guys can, because some people do a more extended crosswalk. So no, you use this page for your template.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, what other questions do you guys have? Like I said, I told Catherine, for those of you that are maybe just now joining us, you know, I'm not gonna sit there and count how many slides you have in your PowerPoint. As long as you make your content, you know, answer the questions and all of that, you're gonna be fine. Don't get hung up on I've only got 10 slides, or oh my gosh, you know, she said no more than 20. I have 22. You know, it's not about that. Okay. How many, oh, okay, that's a good question. Thank you, Brandon. How many standards do you do in the PowerPoint? Just one. You don't have to do all 6. Just pick one of the 6 that you put on here and go more in depth, because what I'm trying to get you to do in the PowerPoint is demonstrate that not only do you understand how to unpack a standard, but then you know how to apply it and do something with it. So just one. Okay, anything else, guys? Are we good?
I do have a quick question. The entire time I've been in this course, I feel like I'm not doing something that I'm supposed to be doing, but I keep going to check all the documents, and it appears that I have it all down. And I think it's just how crazy my life is right now. More than anything, it's not like an organization thing on anybody else's end. So I was just wondering, so this thing, what we have due this week is the discussion forum, and that's by Sunday, but as soon as we can get it done, the better. And then next Sunday is just the crosswalk, or I don't even remember what it is now.
Yeah, it's just that first case study, which is the crosswalk in the PowerPoint. That's due August the 4th. Yeah.
Okay. And that's it really for this week and next week?
Mm-hmm, it is. Now I did go ahead. Hang on, guys. I've got to get back to. I've lost Moodle somehow in here. Let me go back.
Tracy, I thought we had a reflection paper we also had to do next week.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So I was going to show you guys in here too that, like I said, sorry, I lost my little page here. Let me share again. There we go. Okay, so that's week 2, we're done. All right, week 3, so you've got a discussion forum due this week, and then I gave you the crosswalk PowerPoint that's called the case study. It's due next Sunday, or a week Sunday, August the 4th. But then in week 4, you do have a reflection question that's due. Remember, your individual assignment right here is due. You're going to submit it here, even though it's not due till the end of week 4. And then I've also given you your midterm exam. Now, that won't be due until August the 11th. But if you haven't looked at it, I'll just go ahead and open it because it's a really challenging assignment. I mean, you're going to spend hours and hours on this. It's 5 questions. And all you're going to do is create a graphic organizer, and it could be anything you want it to be, or a visual or whatever, answering these questions, okay? So in terms of going back to Erin's question, so sorry, my computer, there we go. So this week in Module 3, we've got the discussion forum and a case study going on. This is due. Then when you get to week 4, you've got the reflection question that's due, as well as your case study. And then your new assignment that's not due until August the 11th is the midterm. But like I said, I don't think you're going to spend just too much time having to knock that one out. Okay? All right. Are we good? Awesome. Okay.
Tracy, is there any way to mute the phone number 985-789?
Yeah. There we go. Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I try to always scan and look, but sometimes I can't see everybody because there's got 24 people, so we're on 2 different screens tonight. Okay, y'all good with the assignments, kind of understanding all that good stuff? Okay. All right, so let's talk about what the plan is for tonight. So let me go ahead and do this real quick. Sorry, I hate this particular, I don't know what it is about this particular document. Let me try this again. Okay, here we go. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about what it is. Sorry, that really came out badly. So tonight we're going to talk about managing change as well as the role of mission and vision. And I will tell you there's a million slides in here. There's 42 of them. We're not going to go through every single one of them, but the whole intent behind this is I want you to really have a very strong understanding of the role of vision and mission, the differences between culture and climate, and then the inevitable thing that happens whenever you put a group of human beings together. What do you do when there's conflict? Now, I'll go into great detail about handling the conflict next week, but just a taste of it to start. For those of you that are planning on becoming certified as principals, assistant principals, school leaders, they talk a lot on the test about vision and mission, culture and climate. So, you know, take notes if you're looking towards that, etc. So without further ado, let's get going here. Okay, so a lot of people think, oh, a PLC, no big deal. You show up and you do some work. The most effective PLCs, there's pre-work that needs to happen. So there's a planning element. Just like if you know if you're going to go into your classroom and deliver an effective lesson, you don't just walk in and do it by the seat of your pants. You may sometimes, but for the most part, there had to have been some intentional planning. The same thing happens with a PLC. If you don't do that, it's not going to be effective. And, Dr. Perry talks all the time about you only get one good start. And I think that's really true with the PLC. That if you don't do it well and you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants, it's going to create some issues for you that maybe could be avoided. So we're also really trying to create that synergy. And, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, where he talks about, plan with the end in mind. Spend more time planning and you'll be very happy, hopefully, with the results at the end. So what do? What's the first thing? I think you have to have some understanding of change and change management, particularly if you are leading or starting a PLC. But even if you're not, there are some normal things that happen as a result of change that you need to be aware of. If we also apply change management, it gives you that structure that you're going to need to really ensure your PLC is doing the kinds of things it needs to be doing. Also, too, it's going to help you in the end lead to a higher level of success. A lot of people don't like change. They run from the word, and so they avoid that particular step. But I'm telling you, change is inevitable, but it also can be really exciting and fun. So what do you do first? Well, the first thing you got to do is identify the people that are going to be in your PLC, but also who's going to be impacted by your PLC. So, for example, when I was talking to you about my site-based decision-making team, that was a professional learning community. I was on it. We had basically, representative teachers who'd been elected by their peers to be on it, and then we had community members. So it was exactly half staff, half community. Community mostly being parents, but we also had a few other like community partners, business partners, and stuff like that. And while we had a pretty good structure going on, I think sometimes we forgot to think about what impact the work we were doing was going to have on the bigger community. So students, the rest of the staff and faculty, all of the parents, the neighborhood we lived in, the city we were in, etc. So you have to really understand not only who's in the meeting and a part of it, but who's going to be impacted out. Because one of the things that happens frequently is there's not a good communication loop. And so that sort of unintended consequence that we didn't communicate well what we were talking about or our decision can be really profound. So important. A way to do that is to find out or to do a needs assessment. So, what is it that people are concerned about or thinking about related to the work of this PLC? Use that need, create a survey, do a tally, I don't know, whatever, but create a way to get feedback about the most important things that this entity should be doing. So, gather your baseline data and you can read that. But, basically the question is, what is needed to help me from the current situation to a new one? So let me give you an example. When I first took over the high school, MacArthur, one of the things that was really out of control was discipline. In fact, I was told by the superintendent that's part of the reason that they wanted me there, was I had to get a handle on discipline. We were having 2 and 3 fights a day, big melee type, like gang type fights and stuff. It was bad. So, I knew what needed to be done. I certainly knew how to handle it, but I also had to really use and leverage my site-based decision-making team to support me because some of the things that needed to happen were pretty controversial. So, for example, we didn't care if it was mutual combat or who started the fight and who didn't unless it was clearly, aggressor and victim. But if it was a mutual combat kind of thing, I suspended both students. And I had to get my site-based decision-making team to agree and then to help communicate that out because it was going to be very impactful across the community. But to do that, we had to make sure people really understood how bad things were, because some people didn't know what it was really going on in the high school. But it was our attempt to make sure everybody understood where we were coming from. So there's lots of different change models. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are some of the ones that are used most frequently. You're probably most familiar with Cotter's theory. You may not know the name, but if you see it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Or maybe the 7S model. So like I said, I'm not going to go through all of these, but they're all excellent and can really kind of guide you through the process. Okay, so this is Lewin's, and like I said, it's pretty simple, and you can read all this, but basically the idea is that you unfreeze, so you kind of lay all the dirty laundry out there. You make some change, and if that change is effective, then you freeze in terms of this is what we're going to continue to do. So for that entire first year I was principal, anybody that was involved in a fight automatically got a 3-day suspension. Automatically. And we did that for an entire year. Once things improved, we came back again and basically unfroze that standard, and we lightened up a little bit because we felt like we were beginning to build community and stuff. And then once we had that new policy in place, we, quote, froze it again and put it into place. Okay, so pretty simple model, but easily applied. So I'm not going to walk you through all this. We just kind of talked about that. The 7S model, a little more complex, but it's really good for analyzing how coherent everybody is. So, it looks at strategy and structure and systems and values, style, staff, and skills. It's a little more cumbersome, but it's really good if you've got a very complex problem, okay? So, a complex problem that we had when I was, at the high school was we weren't graduating as many students as we needed to. We had some students that we were losing. They were what I would call the perpetual freshmen. It's the 20-year-old that's still classified as a ninth grader. That was a real problem. It was complex, though. It wasn't as simple as it seemed. So we had to look at what was our current strategy, what was a better strategy, what was our current structure that wasn't working, what kind of systems did we have or not have, why did this matter? What was the value behind it? And a lot of times people forget when you're looking at implementing some kind of change, what is the value or belief of the organization that's going to push you forward? If you can't define that, you got a whole other problem that you need to deal with. How are we going to deal with this in terms of style? Basically that just for us became our communications piece. Who was going to be involved, and then what was that skill set that we all needed to have to be able to do this successfully. Okay, so here's a nice little graphic of what this looks like. And if you haven't read or heard of the book In Search of Excellence, it's been around forever. And it is probably a little outdated now because some of the companies that they highlight as, the best of the best are no longer around. But personally, I think it's a great book because it really does give you great concrete examples of how to handle and use change to affect an organization. Okay, Cotter's. This is the one that most people have seen most frequently. And the things that's nice about it, it creates urgency. You get a core or a guiding coalition. There's a vision. You get everybody on board. And spending time using Cotter's theory with change before you even jump into doing something will really help to eliminate a lot of those conflicts and problems on down the line. Okay, so here's what it looks like in terms of the actual process. Okay, and here's the book about it, Leading Change by John P. Cotter, excuse me. And this, like I said, it really is probably one of the best known ones. Okay, then you have what's called the nudge theory. There's not really a model behind it, but it's basically that you just kind of keep pushing in small increments what it is you're trying to change, okay? That if you try to enforce change, it's not going to happen. So let me give you, again, I'll go back to the high school and give you an example. So when we were talking about how to deal with discipline, I could have been just very autocratic and said, here's what we do. Everybody get on board. But because we took time to talk about it and dissect it and look at the problem and look at the solutions and understand what the outcomes were, what was going to be the impact, those kind of things, we ended up with a very sound plan and actually exceeded our goals for what we were doing. So nudging is you just kind of push it out in little pieces. So the visual that always comes to mind for me is if you've ever seen a dog or a puppy who maybe is playing with a ball or a bone or something, and they'll just push it a little bit with their nose and push it a little bit more. It's kind of the same idea in terms of how you address change. Okay? Okay, so in terms of this, you define your changes. Like I said, these are all so similar. But you also give people choice in the change. So, oftentimes, like when working with teachers, I'd say, okay, here's what we need, here's where we need to get to, here's 3 different routes. You get to choose which route, but as long as you make the outcome, that's fine, okay? It also gives people short-term wins, which can be really beneficial when you're dealing with change. And again, another graphic of it, as well as the book that goes along, okay? The ADKAR model, it's a bottom-up method, which really starts with your most critical stakeholders. So one of the things that happened when I was the high school principal was that we had this great big field house that, where we played basketball and volleyball and all that. But attached to the field house were Not only the locker rooms and team rooms and all that, but it was a bank of 17 classrooms. Well, we were about to undergo some renovations and stuff, and it included the field house. And when the engineers came out to start looking at it, we realized that that particular structure was in imminent danger of collapsing. So pretty scary, right? You know, because I thinking about when they tell me this like on a Tuesday, that just that last Friday I'd had 4,000 kids sitting in that very space that could have collapsed. So it was decided that they actually had to tear it down, and they did an implosion. The problem was this was happening about 2 weeks before school started, and we were losing not only the place where we did basketball and volleyball and all of that, we were losing 17 classrooms, you know, which is a huge thing when you're trying to think about where do you put everybody. Well, the more we thought, we figured out all those nuts and bolts pieces, but the element that I had forgotten about was that was also where we did all of our pep rallies. Now, in Texas, football is sort of sacred, and so we're pep rallies before the football game. And, you know, to me, it's like, we just won't have pep rallies. Well, obviously, this really, really upset the students and a lot of the parents and all that, and quite frankly, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a space I could have a pep rally in anymore. You know, it just was a huge issue. So I just went to the students and some of my student leaders, and I'm like, guys, here's the deal. Here's the problem. I want you guys to solve it. And lo and behold, they did. We went from having the traditional kind of pep rally in a great big gym, you know, where everybody goes at, you know, 3:30, and we spend 30 minutes having a pep rally, and then we dismiss school. They decided to do lunchtime pep rallies. So we had 3 lunch periods. And we brought the drum line and the cheerleaders and the drill team and the football players and all that, depending on their lunch period. They had pep rallies during lunch in the cafeteria. It was a brilliant solution. Accomplished a lot of things, even unintended things that were really positive. We didn't lose any more instructional time. It made lunch was much more fun, like I said. But that was the I cannot speak tonight, sorry. ADKAR model. It starts at the bottom. So you give the people who are the most impacted by a change or a pending change the problem and let them solve it. Okay? So again, another graphic. Now, Bridges' transition model is fairly new in terms of theories. It was actually created in 1991, and it focused more on transition rather than the actual change. Okay, so what it means is it's sort of like if you're having discipline problems in your school, you know, you start thinking about where you have the most problems. And if you've ever been through a discipline sort of analysis thing, most problems occur during transition. Okay, so this model focuses on not the change, but what's happening during transition. Okay, it's not really well known or well used because it's probably a little more challenging, and it also takes a long time, but it can be appropriate. Okay, so again, here's your graphic, and William Bridges, who created this. Okay. So same thing, here's another graphic illustration that kind of shows you. And one of the things that, you know, this graphic kind of describes pretty well is that idea of, you know, when you start and you're trying to end something, people are going to be shocked and denied. So they were shocked and angry and all of that we were ending, they thought, pep rallies. Then we went through this sort of neutral time where there's a lot of confusion and frustration, you know, including on the part of the leadership because we didn't know what to do. But then as we began to transition into that new idea, you will see that you get excitement, engagement, and high energy. So even if you're not using the Bridges model specifically, this is important to understand with change. When you first introduce change, there's going to be, I guarantee you, shock, denial, and anger. Some people will get over it very quickly. Some people will carry it for years. But you have to deal with it, and we'll talk more about that in the class. Okay. Again, another change model, and you'll notice too, let me go back. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Okay, kind of like the grief cycle. Okay. Here's another graphic. Okay. I'll let y'all just take a minute if you haven't already read this. That's been my day today. Okay? Like I said, it's very much like the 5 stages of grief. Okay. And I'm going to skip through some of these because, like I said, just a reminder, change is inevitable. You know, that we have to understand that it's going to happen. There are normal human reactions to change. But if we pay attention to that, you know, we can very effectively not only manage it, but lead others through it. Okay? So what does that all mean? It all means that whenever you're doing something new and different or revamping, okay, and, you know, so let's think in terms of a professional learning community. Based on what I've been reading from you guys so far, some of you are in high-functioning PLCs. Some of you are in some that need to be kind of kicked in the butt and kind of re-energized. Some of you are not in a PLC at all. So you're all at different stages in terms of implementation and gauging effectiveness of your professional learning community. So a lot of times people ask me, what is sort of the meat? What's the most important thing in a professional learning community? And it all goes back to mission and vision. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for just 1 second here. I want to see a show of hands. How many of you guys have a mission and a vision statement for your school or your school district? How many of you can recite it by heart? If you can't recite it by heart, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not a good mission and it's not a good vision statement. We tend to write, in fact, there's an elementary school that I drive by every day on my way home from LSUS. And they have proudly up there on their marquee their mission statement. And it's ridiculously long with a whole lot of educational terms that nobody gives two hoots about. Mission and vision should be the absolute most important guiding factor within a school and within a PLC. And if it's long and verbose, I'm telling you it's not going to work. So let's go back to sharing, and I'll get off my soapbox about mission and vision. Okay, so mission and vision provides a well-structured way to communicate. It's really simple because people don't even understand the difference between the two. But a mission is knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Your vision is where we're trying to go. And then if you don't have, and most schools don't have values or beliefs, but it tells us how we're going to go about it. Okay? So let's talk for just a second. Sorry, why is this not going? Stop. It's not liking me now. Okay, there we go. All right, so thinking about a mission, vision, and value statement, they all should be interwoven. So our vision when I was at MacArthur High School was to educate students ready for the 21st century. That was it. Pretty simple. What was our mission? Was to educate all students to be able to succeed at anything they chose in life. And what was our value? We were going to do it as what we called the creative revolutionaries. That we wanted to basically set the world on fire. It took us a long time to come up with those 3 statements. We spent almost a year doing it. But it became extremely powerful because everybody had buy-in and everybody really did everything they needed to do to create that synergy. Okay? So don't confuse them. Mission is present tense. Vision is future tense. Okay? And I know it's kind of an English thing, but so what is your core purpose? Why you exist? And what we're trying to accomplish. Vision is your desired state. So we wanted to educate students for the 21st century. That was our vision. What was our mission? We were going to do all students so they could do anything they wanted in their lives after they graduated from high school. So if you wanted to go be the best plumber in America, you were equipped to do that. If you wanted to go be a brain surgeon, you were going to be equipped to do those things. Okay? Values. Like I said, and I'm curious, I'm going to stop sharing again for a second because I'm just curious. How many of you guys have values or belief statements for your schools? Okay. Very few. Yeah, I see Aaron and Jennifer. Anybody else? Yeah, it's pretty small. Okay, yeah, Bonnie, thank you. Guys, it's probably, honestly, I think the values and beliefs are the most important thing in the world, in terms of a school. What are we about? What is it that's important to us? And ours were pretty simple, that we were going to make sure that we had, sort of the overarching thing was we were going to have the best possible teacher we could in every classroom. We valued that we were going to respect diversity, those kind of things, but if you don't spend some time understanding that, then I think it's really hard to create a cohesiveness of an organization, particularly in a professional learning community. Those values for us drove who we hired, the kinds of questions we asked in interviews. When people were acting not in accordance with the way they should, we would ask them, is that within our value system? It got to, and we had this little catchphrase that it became so ingrained in who we were, that the students would even say it. And we had the MacArthur way. And the students would, I'm sure they were making fun of us, but they were doing things like, is that the MacArthur way? No, it's not, because those values really, really mattered. Okay, now let me go back to share again. And let's get through this and finish it up for you guys. Okay, so how do you get started with all this? Talk first about what do you do that's the best. When I went to MacArthur High School, we were pretty much at the bottom of everything. We hadn't won any athletic championships or games or anything in a long time. Culture was bad. The climate was bad. The discipline was awful. Not the only thing we did do okay with was our academics were higher than the other high schools in the district. Not a lot to brag about. But we actually made that a big deal, and even got our students on board. And I'd hear them saying to students from other high schools, well, you may be this and that, but we're the smartest. We have the best test scores. Kind of funny to listen to high school students do that, but we had a major marketing campaign. What's your vision? Where are we headed? Your mission, as I said, why we exist, and what are your core values? It's what we stand for. Okay. So again, how do you do this? Very simple questions. Who, what, where kind of thing. And you can read those and understand them, hopefully. This is where data comes in. You have to know what the current state is. You've got to make sure that whatever you create is going to be in alignment, like with the district or with the state or whoever else. I know when I was at MacArthur and Irving, the board had vision statements. So, we tried to always make sure that we were in alignment with those. And then if there's any other external entities that you want to be in alignment with as well, you've got to know what all of those pieces are. Okay. So again, this is just somewhat repetitive, but I like what Peter Drucker says, that he said, your mission should fit on a t-shirt. If it doesn't, you got too much. And it should serve as a guide for day-to-day operations, as well as ground you for that future decision making. Okay. Elements, again, I'm not going to walk you through all this. I think you can read it, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's, like I said, fit on the t-shirt. Things like to serve the most vulnerable. That's the Red Cross's mission. It should be very clear and simple to understand. Basically it's that elevator speech. Okay, if you should be able to do the vision and mission in the time you're on an elevator, kind of thing. How do you discover what you value? Again, here's some guiding questions that you can use. And again, more information about the vision. So I shamelessly stole this from the Garland Independent School District in Texas. I love the graphic, but I also love the fact that it's very clear. So what's their vision? Reaching the future by driving excellence one student at a time. Pretty good thing to aspire to. What's their mission? It exists as a diverse community with a shared vision that serves to provide an exceptional education to all its students. So, can I walk around every day in a school and see that they have an exceptional education? That's the guidepost. What do they believe? Every student can learn. Every student deserves our best. We celebrate all cultures. We respect all students, families, staff, and communities, and we will demonstrate ethical behavior. Fits on a t-shirt, not just the mission, the whole thing. That is exactly what hopefully your school has. If it doesn't, not all hope is lost. You know, you may be going, well, I'm a teacher. You know, I don't do that. I don't make those decisions. If you're in a PLC, you can create your own vision and mission and what you value for your grade level, for your department, for your content area, for your classroom. There's a lot of ways that this can be used quite effectively to really impact what's going on. Okay? Yeah, I love what you said, Aaron, about values. So he said that the mission's obvious, but the values are how you can evaluate each other in the same environment. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Comments, questions, concerns? Wide open. Okay, so if you're a sequential thinker or a gold, let me just kind of tell you where we are in terms of PLCs. So before you start a PLC, you've got to really do some data gathering. What's the mission and vision and the values of my organization? What kind of things are the problems that we need to be addressing? Then you need to decide who's going to be on the PLC, what the focus of the work is going to be. And that's all part of that needs assessment and that data gathering piece. Then once you decide who's going to be on that PLC, and we'll talk more about the pre-work that happens before the first meeting later on. But then the next step is going to be that once that PLC starts, you know, spend some time in team building, get to know each other on a human level. You know, maybe use some of the leadership profile assessments so you know who you're dealing with and how people like to work, how they like to be recognized, you know, what is their sort of thought process in terms of how they approach the work. And then we'll go from there. Okay. And I see the same question popping up again that, yeah, for the PowerPoint, you only do one standard. Okay. All right. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Y'all are making it easy for me to earn my money tonight. Okay, well, without further ado then, guys, we'll see you next week. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.